Okay, so we're going to have a couple, Mike is going to present, and then we're going to have our customer panel where we're going to have some questions and a little bit of Q&A, and then we're going to go to lunch. Not sure how far lunch will be. Lunch will be right outside the door, I would imagine. So with that, I'm actually going to introduce Mike Walker. I think it's Walker, yeah. And who heads up our Global Innovations Labs for Red Hat, which is a new thing that we've done over the last, I think, 18 months or so, right? And it's had tremendous success, and I think is something that's going to really change the way everyone looks at Red Hat, and maybe the way you look at how your way forward and how to get things started. So with that, I'm going to introduce Mike.
Thanks, everyone. I am really excited to be back in Toronto, and really excited to be at Red Hat right now to share with you this new way of working together called Open Innovation Labs. And it is, we launched it officially 13 months ago, but the idea was born about 18 months ago, so you're accurate there. So today what I'm going to do is a few things. First of all, I want to just tell you the story of why we created this new way of working together called Labs, a place to co-create software and be the catalyst for change and for transformation. So a little bit of the background and why now? Why did Red Hat do this now? And then give you some insight into what life is like at Labs. So we've been doing this for about a year, and I can share with you some customer stories, which is fun. And then thirdly, I'm going to mix in a little bit of a live demo and do some technical stuff. So we'll do something for everyone, and fingers crossed, we'll have a fun time doing it as well. So first, a little bit about me. My name is Mike Walker. I'm the Global Director of Open Innovation Labs. I got my IT start as an engineer in a startup company. They got acquired, went to another startup, did consulting, and they got acquired by Red Hat. So I joined around the same time as Brent, actually, wherever Brent is, about 11 years ago. And looking back, when I joined, I have the consulting perspective, so I get to talk to a wide variety of customers in different areas. And it's incredible to look from, when I joined, Red Hat was 1,500 people, and now we're 10,000. When I started, I was coming in as part of the middleware acquisitions to build out the JBoss portfolio. And Red Hat at the time, especially as a consulting organization in the field, was mainly working on a product-by-product basis, focusing a lot on making people successful with RHEL. And so our conversations were very focused on products. And then I think we went through our first big change. Bringing in the middleware suite, it expanded our ability to have conversations about solutions, solving business problems with a combination of our platform and middleware. And then I think Red Hat has hit the third wave. So we invested heavily in cloud computing. We have this fantastic portfolio, kind of brings it all together. Brent talked about the substrate. I like to say Labs is the catalyst to that substrate to create the reaction and the transformation. But what it has done in terms of conversations with customers is we are now talking about true transformational change. How do we use all this technology to really change business fundamentally in a real new way? And so that's fun for me. It increases our strategic relevance and impact to what we do together, which there's nothing more exciting than that. But when we talk about transformational change, it's really easy to get locked up in a discussion about tool X or tool Y or tool Z. What configuration management tool should I use, et cetera. And so I like to open things with this quote as kind of a reminder to step back. And when we talk about IoT or big data or machine learning or any kind of transformational change for the business, first and foremost, it's about people, and it's about organizational cultures. And then it's about how people work together to get things done. So think about it for a second. You've got a tool, for example, a hammer. It's sitting on the shelf. It has no intrinsic usefulness on its own, right? You need a subject and an object. You need someone to pick that hammer up. Once you're hammering a nail with that hammer, well, now it's something useful. Okay. When somebody takes that hammer and comes up with a clever new use for it, opening a beer bottle, well, that's interesting. That's innovative. When communities of users get together to use that tool to do things differently, to get things done in a new way, that's the seeds of real transformation. And that's what companies need to start looking at, is getting communities of users engaged with technology to do things differently. That's truly the impetus of that kind of change. But we have a problem. if you look at most businesses, they're not designed to encourage that kind of true innovation and transformation. And there's a reason for this. We have a history behind it, right? A lot of our traditional organizational structures are top-down, and that's rooted in the Industrial Revolution and mechanization of our industries in the 1800s and Taylorism. And as a result of that, we have a system that's designed for incremental improvements, incremental innovations, and operational efficiencies. Right, it's a command and control structure where ideas come from the top down, and then we're measured by certain metrics in terms of efficiencies and operations. And that's really, really good for incremental innovation, and it's really, really bad for transformational change, because you don't get the bubbling up of engaged communities of users. About 2 years ago, almost exactly, our CEO, and Brent may mention this as well, released a book called Open Organization. And I think this was a big moment in Red Hat's time, because we put down on paper kind of what's going on at Red Hat and how we've been successful at taking the principles of open source and building a $2 billion software company. And it's not magic, but it's a reversal, a lot of those principles of the typical command and control organization from the 1800s. And I took this from his book to talk about bringing ideas from the bottom up. So at Red Hat, and in really any open source community, we encourage people to bring ideas from the bottom up. There's a meritocracy. The best idea wins. It's not simply the person at the top that gets to decide the strategy. And it's a natural conflict. We let the sparks fly and argue about things. And through that nice natural discourse, really good stuff can emerge, and you get buy-in as a process. And this is a great way to create really fundamental change. And I'll give you an example, and that example is OpenShift. So OpenShift is a software product that's gone through 3 major releases in just 5 years, which is really, really fast. And each one of those releases has actually been in a different programming language, which is kind of even more amazing. Now, OpenShift 2, when it came out, I would argue that it was a success by pretty much any measure. It won numerous awards. Enterprises have used it by the dozens to run their mission-critical applications in production. We have actually run over 2 million applications on OpenShift 2 and counting. And you could say, well, gosh, Red Hat, you could rest on your laurels and continually to incrementally improve that product. But we didn't. At Red Hat, we are always looking outside to the communities to see what's going on and how we might be influenced by communities outside Red Hat. And there's this little company in California called Google, which had taken their learnings running containers at web scale for now about 15 years, and they took their 2 closed projects, Zool and Omega, and took the learnings from that and released a paper, and they said, we're going to open source this, and the project is Kubernetes. And that really got Red Hat's attention, and we realized, gosh, that's an awesome team to partner with. And so we made a bold decision. We said, let's build a new version of OpenShift, OpenShift 3, let's rip out the entire innards that's working well, and let's replace it with Kubernetes completely. And let's replace it with Docker. And let's join up with those communities outside us to change the way our software works in a very fundamental way. As a result, we're now the #1 contributor to Kubernetes outside of Google. We're also the #1 contributor to Docker outside of Docker Inc. So we're driving that change. And the end result is in just 18 months, we were able to produce OpenShift 3. And I think the results will speak for themselves, so I will let you be the judge of the success of OpenShift 3. But in my opinion, I think it's a fundamental part of Red Hat's history that we made that big, bold, and risky move, and now have what I'm very excited is an awesome product as a result of it. So how were we able to do all this? It's not just because we're an open source software company, it's because of our culture and the way that we think about getting things done. It's because we understand that by engaging in communities both internally and externally, it allows us to adapt change more easily. There's a phrase that a lot of people use to talk about the unwillingness to adapt ideas from the outside. It's called not invented here syndrome. Maybe you've heard of it, NIH, people call it that. I like to joke that in Red Hat, actually, we have the NIH syndrome. Nothing is invented here. Everything we do is invented in the communities of open source. So if we're coming up with new ideas, we're putting it upstream first, and we're bringing it into our enterprise products. And that allows us to always be thinking outside of just Red Hat and looking outside for influence and pulling in great ideas from places like Google, for instance. Because OpenShift was based on open standards and APIs, because we're open by default, we were able to more quickly flex and bring in fundamental new parts of the architecture and move fast and release in 18 months. And because we believe that shared problems are solved faster, we were able to team up with Google and aren't afraid to take those kind of risks. So my point here is that these principles are not just for Red Hat. They are principles of driving great software. Frankly, you can use it to build proprietary software too. These are just cultural principles to get things done using technology in new ways. And so we were asked by customers to synthesize that experience, to bring the ability to work and co-create great applications with Red Hat in a space. In fact, about 18 months ago, our strategic advisory board came to Red Hat and they said, you guys need a space that's purpose-built to incubate new ideas the open source way. And that's why we established labs. So we created a space to innovate. And I like this picture. It's the School of Athens by Raphael. And the idea in this picture here is all these different philosophers from around the world are getting together in a single place to debate and to argue and to come up with new ideas and to push the boundaries of human understanding about the human condition. And that's what a lab is really all about. Gavin Newsom in this quote here mentions, it's not just about the tools and technologies that you get in a lab, it's about spurring a culture of innovation that can drive, in this case, the government to use technology to bring the industry closer to the people. And so that's the same vision for Open Innovation Labs. Let's open source Red Hat's DNA. Let's open the doors to Red Hat. Bring customers in, bring partners in, and co-create. Let's provide access to everything in Red Hat's arsenal, all of our tools and technology, and make it easy to use so that we can get started right away building applications the open source way and create infectious enthusiasm for doing it that way so that we can bring back and fundamentally create transformational change. So that's how we got started, and now I want to share a little bit more about how Labs works, what's the secret sauce, and what it's like to work at Labs. And I'll start with a bit of a riddle. So what does an award-winning restaurant and Open Innovation Labs have in common? Well, look at a great restaurant and you look inside the kitchen, you'll notice a few things. It's clean, it's open, it's transparent, everybody can see what everyone else is doing, there's nowhere to hide. You have all the best tools, you have all the best ingredients, and it's built for speed and experimentation. If you look at the chefs, and in fact, not just the chefs, but the entire restaurant staff, they usually get together in the morning and they look at the menu and they taste the daily specials and the chef's describing it to the staff and they say, I like it or I don't like it, this doesn't taste right. And they're looking each other in the eye and they're making a commitment to each other. What we make today and what we ship to our customers, our patrons, we own the success of that meal together. And we're one team with a shared passion to make this work today. And they duke it out, and they don't always agree, but they come to agreement by the end that we're ready to ship the daily meal. And so that creates shared accountability for success. If you look at the method, it's a pipeline in the back of house. Everybody has a role to play. They work together to build great meals. You have an expediter at the top of the line that smells the food and tastes it and sends it back if it's not good. And what does that do? It allows people to move quickly and build the dishes fast, but also maintain high quality. And if you look at the meal and really the experience of a great restaurant, it's something for all of the senses. It's immersive. It's the taste, it's the smell, it's the social aspect, the conversations you have that you'll remember. Great restaurants are not doing a lot of advertising in printed media and on TV. You don't see commercials for a great steakhouse. It's spread by word of mouth and by reviews and by people saying, man, you got to go to this place. It's an amazing experience. So that's the essence of what we're building at Labs. We invite folks to come to Labs to experience DevOps in our kitchen, to work with subject matter experts and bring that enthusiasm back in-house about doing things differently. So Labs, at its essence, is a residency-style engagement where we work in small teams. We usually take 3 to 6 folks from a customer or partner team, maybe engineers, application developers, infrastructure, operations, and a product owner. And we pair up with subject matter experts from Red Hat in different tools, technologies, and software development methodologies. Together, we work in a time box fashion, usually 1 to 3 months long on purpose, and we experiment. We prototype. We build application prototypes. We apply principles of lean engineering to fail fast and pivot to get to something that works and delivers real business value. So you walk out with a working prototype. But moreover, we come up with recipes, with new ways of working together that may apply principles from Agile, from Scrum, you name it. And we can bring those recipes back to the enterprise to really say, hey, look, this works, I've got the prototype to prove it, and now we need to adopt this as a new way of building software together. So if you compare that to traditional IT and how we normally get things done, it's really different working in labs. In traditional IT, well, I'll put it this way. At labs, we are very, very focused on the way we work and the culture of innovation. It's all about speed to value. That's why we time box it to 1 to 3 months. At labs, we work in small teams, so the amount of investment and risk is much smaller. And then we provide all of the infrastructure, the tools and technologies in a way that just works, and it makes life easy, so that we're not spending months and months before we get to see the first bit of value for a new application or for an app that we're modernizing. So that's the concept of labs. Now let me explain a little bit more about what we've used it for and what kind of use cases have resonated with customers that have been through the labs experience. So the first one might be obvious. Because we're built for speed and experimentation, labs is a great way to disrupt, either to disrupt your own enterprise or disrupt another company. It's a great place to co-create and rapidly stand up an innovative new product. But it's also a place to create that seed for transformation. So I like, frankly, Red Hat works with a lot of enterprises and a lot of large government entities, and I kind of compare them to the cargo ship in this picture here. Really big, hard to move, and hard to change the course. So labs in the picture here is the tugboat to the cargo ship. And it's important to get out of the cargo ship from time to time and spend some time in a tugboat, something that's purpose-built to move that cargo ship. And maybe we just tug it 1 degree to the left or east or the west. But over time, it'll take that cargo ship in a fundamentally different direction and maybe bluer waters. And the third use case is what I call the road trip. So take, for example, the Tesla automobile. Very expensive vehicle, $100,000. And I'm not going to buy the Tesla just by reading a review on Consumer Reports. I'm not even going to buy it just by taking a 5-minute test drive. I want to take it on a road trip. I want to take it through different terrains, through the mountains, and I want to put my family in the back and see if they all fit. I want to have a subject matter expert from Tesla Inc. sitting with me, telling me how to get the best out of everything, what all the knobs and switches do. And then when I'm done with my road trip, I can make that strategic investment in that technology and buy my Tesla or a fleet of Teslas based on that experience. I've seen what is possible with that car and really experienced the state of the art. And the same is true at labs. You get to experience the state of the art in a very concentrated residency, and then use that to make strategic investment decisions for your next 5, 10 years of IT investment. So looking back, we've now been alive and kicking for 13 months, and I wanted to share a few different customer success stories that meet kind of each of those use cases to illustrate it a bit further. So the first one is a startup, and this is fun because, as a Red Hatter for a long time, we've traditionally worked with large enterprises, and now we're working with startups. And this one, they weren't even coders or technologists. It's a startup founded by a nurse and a doctor in Switzerland, and their mission came out of a PhD thesis to simplify and improve emergency care assistance for folks in Europe. And they realize there's a problem when people are in waiting rooms for 4 hours and sometimes not getting the help they need because they're not getting proper assistance, they're not getting properly triaged. And they said, we can do better by using technology to change the way that works. So they came to us with an idea, and they came to us with zero code. We started from absolute ground zero. And because Red Hat Labs provided all of the infrastructure we needed, we began designing and coding on day one. 5 weeks later, we had not one, but 2 applications. We had this epiphany during the first week where the engineers all got on the side and they said, you know what, this doesn't make sense. We don't want to build just one app for this. You need an app for the patient in the mobile phone, and you need an app for the nurse on a tablet to manage triage. And the founder said, you know what, you're right. We didn't want to tell you that because we didn't think we could do that in 5 weeks, but you're absolutely right. So we ended up building 2 apps. The patient app is in the hand of your mobile device, and it allows you to get information about a patient, like their insurance information, their whereabouts on GPS, time of day and their time zone, and their relative proximity to different emergency care facilities. And then when they report an incident or a case, an issue, it can make a best recommendation of the care facilities that meet their criteria, then provide them with driving directions to that facility, and allow them to report the case into the nurse. On the tablet side, the nurse can see all the cases that come in, acknowledge and communicate with the patient, manage a triage, and assign each case based on what equipment is required in each emergency room and the severity of the case. So this was awesome. We got it stood up in 5 weeks, which was a phenomenally quick time, and allowed them to go shop this to different trusts and markets and also achieve more venture capital funding. So that's kind of the disrupt or speedboat use case. Here's one that's more about transformation. So this is that very large healthcare company, Fortune 6 company that Brent mentioned earlier. And they spoke at Summit about it as well. But their challenge was incredible pace of growth. So they actually are achieving revenue growth of over $1 billion more each quarter, which is insane. And they simply cannot move fast enough to bring new products to market and to onboard new developers. And their developer onboarding time was 2 weeks. Their objective was to get it to 1 day. And so we brought them into labs, kind of like an incubator, and came up with a strategy for what they called cloud scaffolding, which is basically a set of automation and tooling to give the developer everything they need to start writing code and pushing that code into a real system in 24 hours. And by the end of our 8-week engagement, we had built that scaffolding system in labs as a prototype. We've now implemented it. It's in production in Optum. That's the customer, which is okay because they're at Summit talking about it. And they're happily using it to onboard scores of developers much faster. And as a result, the business can bring new products to market more faster. The third example is the road trip. So this is a retail customer, and their challenge was Black Friday. So last November, they had a terrible issue with their website. And this is one of the biggest brick and mortar retail in certainly the United States. And you would go to their website, and for a portion of the community, it said, we're having difficulties, please refresh your browser and wait 15 seconds. And that is like the absolute worst thing that you can have on your website on Black Friday, their busiest shopping day of the year. And so they realized that the root of the issue was that they were running everything in a private data center, and certain things just didn't scale. And they needed a strategy that was fundamentally based on open hybrid cloud. Their main competitor is Amazon, so they needed to run both a private data center, and not Amazon, but in their case, Google Cloud. And so they came to us saying, what is it going to be like when we're running in this open hybrid cloud world? And how are we going to solve those business problems like cloud bursting and scale out? So we took the crown jewel of their e-commerce application, which was product search. We containerized it. We onboarded it to a cloud environment. We wrote auto-scaling algorithms, and this was in the course of about 6 weeks. And we proved that, hey, look, if you use open hybrid cloud, if you use public cloud when you need to burst and create more microservices to support your product search, you won't be having those same problems next year, which was a huge win for them because now they can invest in OpenShift, in Google Cloud, and invest in the strategy. But what was most interesting about this was actually the cultural aspect. So they're an advanced DevOps and Agile shop, in my opinion. But it really has mainly been focused on the app squads. So for the first time ever at Labs, we brought in application developers and actually had them work with operations and infrastructure folks in one project team. And the amazing change was, for the first time ever, the infrastructure folks came to me and they said, hey, people aren't just pointing at me and saying, this isn't working, fix it. I'm actually considered a leader in this solution. And they got up on stage at the end of our work effort and presented to the set of stakeholders. And that was game-changing for them. In fact, they said, to me, career-changing, because it elevates their status and their ability to get things done and have influence on the company. So that was a huge takeaway. So those are some customer examples. Now let's dive into what really happens in a labs engagement in that residency. So everything starts with what we call a discovery session. And this is a one-day session where we get together face-to-face. And before we dive into any kind of technology, we say, what kind of business value are we trying to create here? And then what are the actors? Who are the people that are going to help or detract us from achieving that value? What are the impacts that we want to see in order to get to that business goal? And then finally, what technologies do we want to explore and what tasks do we want to do to reach those objectives? And basically by tracing that line from technology to impact to actors to business goal, we get what's called an impact map. And each one of those lines represents a hypothesis. We don't know if it's going to work or not until we test that theory in labs. And that becomes the basis for what we do together at labs. So after we do that, we use something called push-button infrastructure to set up everything we need to begin application development on day one. And rather than talk about it, I'll show you in the demo here in a second. And then we apply agile and lean principles. So we work in sprints, and we produce software each sprint. It all culminates in something called Demo Day. So think about a startup working in an incubator where we get together with stakeholders and we show everyone, hey, here's what we built in a short amount of time by using labs as the catalyst for that. And along the way, every participant that's in a labs residency gets access to Red Hat Learning subscriptions. And I don't know if other folks here are already using it, but it's awesome. We call it the Netflix of training. So it's everything in our training catalog online, available in microlearning segments, which is really useful beyond the scope of labs because we realize technology moves very quickly. Labs is short. So you're going to want to be learning before, during, and after a labs engagement. And you get access to RHLS for 1 year as a participant at labs. And finally, we understand that, hey, this was time-boxed. It's part of a much bigger picture, a much bigger transformational picture. So we do two things in a retrospective at the end of the engagement. Number one, we recognize what are the things we need to do to take this prototype further, to take it into production. This is not throwaway work. This is something that's going to have continued development. So we release a product backlog, and we organize that backlog. The second thing we do is, what's the roadmap for change? So what are the recipes that we want to take back, and how are we going to integrate them back into the enterprise? And we create a plan for that as well. And then the last thing that we walk out with in the residency is the notion of the dojo. So if we've been successful working in a lab and we want to bring that back to the enterprise, one thing that has worked well, and I won't mention the customer because apparently they're not popular in Canada, but it's the concept of the dojo, which is to allow other teams to come in to a place that's custom built for practicing the art of DevOps. And Gene Kim, who did write the Phoenix Project and the DevOps Handbook, among other things, has this great quote about kind of the 3 ways of DevOps. And he points out that, the way to succeed is by continually experimenting and by repetition in order to master an event. So we talk about the kata. So that's like a series of karate moves that you practice every day, and over time you get really good at them. And that's what a dojo is built for. And so we bring the dojo, which is essentially an in-house lab, to allow different teams to onboard and experience in a daily way the ritual of doing DevOps so that they can bring that back to their teams and spread the word. So with that, let's switch to actually building a lab. Pretend for a moment we've done a discovery session and we've got an idea of what we want to deliver in terms of business value. We need to take an existing application and do some rapid application development on it. And I need a lab today that provides me access to all the state-of-the-art technologies in an integrated way that's easy to use. So I'm going to build a lab using push-button infrastructure, and then we're going to do some application development to see what it's like when we're moving fast and able to experiment safely. And I'll demonstrate 3 important things. Cycle time, one important metric of DevOps that I like to ask folks is, how long does it take to go from idea to production or concept to cache? And yeah, I think we heard today, it's gone down from 7 months to 6 months. So what if we're doing that daily? What is life going to be like then? How much faster can we innovate if we can reduce that cycle time? Also, quality. How do we enforce in an automated way that what we put out the door is high quality and secure? And finally, repeatability. I want to make sure that when I'm working and I've got this great piece of software or a new idea on my laptop, that it works the same way in production that it does on my laptop. So I'll demonstrate each of those items. So the first thing I want to show you is this website. And frankly, we built this website 13 months ago to demonstrate what Labs had. And it was non-functional when we built it. But all of the technologies behind it at Labs were there, because we mainly built Labs using experiences automating an entire stack and a financial services client over a 2.5-year period. And that became the open source foundation for what we use at Labs today. But what we found is the reaction was really positive to this site, so we made it functional, and now I can use it to build a stack. So that's what we're going to do. So it all starts at Labs with the container platform, which is OpenShift, based on Docker, Kubernetes, and a lot of goodies for making it very easy to use. We deploy OpenShift as in a reference architecture as dictated by Red Hat, clustered with high availability, and we provide tools for monitoring and logging to get the experience of what it's like to operate this environment. It's also important that everything we build at Labs is containerized. Why? Because we want it to be portable. We want you to be able to take back what we build, and frankly, if you don't want to run it in OpenShift, you can run it in any place you can run Linux containers, which is basically any modern Linux OS. So you have that choice and flexibility of open standards when you build at Labs. And lastly, it's built on Linux. And this is really important. Built on Red Hat Enterprise Linux. And it's important because if we do experience problems, let's say between the kernel of the operating system and something that the container platform is using, we can bring in all of the expertise of Red Hat. We've got access to leading engineers, really the rock stars of Kubernetes, Docker, of Linux, et cetera. And we can work together to solve those problems and maybe even create new ideas. But you have your choice of hosting infrastructure at Labs. So we have a private data center where you can work on bare metal or Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization or OpenStack. And we also have access to public cloud. So if you're already looking at or using Azure, Google Cloud Platform, or AWS, you can do that as well at Labs. You get it as part of your access. You can even mix and match. So if you want to experience Open Hybrid Cloud and run workloads on both private and public cloud environments, we can do that. So today, we're going to actually build a lab on OpenStack, so I'll choose that. And then you have a set of tools that are ready out of the gate to do modern application development. Make this a little bit bigger. And you can see all of our middleware enterprise open source technologies are available as containerized images and ready to roll. So that includes tools for messaging, for enterprise integration. You can experiment with business rules engines and business process workflows and scheduling engines through BRMS. Build a mobile application, which many of our Labs customers have been doing. In this case, I want to deploy a web server, and I'm going to build a Node.js application. I want to have a backing store of MongoDB. But as you can see, there's a lot of tools and technologies on here, and if there's something that you want that's not here, it's actually a great exercise in Labs to bring it into the stack and automate it so that from that point onward, we're adding that infrastructure component as code. But we don't stop at the app dev tools. We also provide a suite of tools for doing DevOps at Labs. We fundamentally use Jenkins because it integrates really well with OpenShift, and it seems to becoming a de facto standard for CI and CD. But you have your choice of source control management systems. I've got code in GitHub, so I'm going to choose that right now. You can also integrate things like Jira for agile project management, Slack or Mattermost for chat. You can practice the art of chat ops to operate your environment using chat together, which is fun and really, really fruitful. Bring in tools for artifact management. So today I'm going to use Nexus and Maven. And so on and so forth. You know, experiment with, for instance, behavior-driven development by using Cucumber, or test-driven development, or UI testing, and different types of test automation. So you get the picture. I'm picking different items in the stack here and adding them to my shopping cart on the right. So the next thing I'll do is submit this. And what I get is a reference architecture diagram. So this is basically the contract of what I get at Labs on day one and what we're going to use to accelerate software development. But this is not just icons on a page. This is actually all integrated and automated to be deployed. And our secret way of doing that is Ansible Tower. So that's where we've done all of the automation work in an open source way to build this out. And what's exciting is we can deploy an environment like this, soup to nuts for a customer, in our public cloud environment of choice in 60 minutes or less. We can deploy it privately in about 35 minutes. So that is a huge leapfrog over what it would normally take to set up this environment, using traditional IT in a data center that might, be slowed down by, traditional issues. And it allows us to really get to business right away and accelerate, real interesting work. So let's go ahead and build it. What I've done is I have an existing application here, which is a Node.js app. And I'm going to give that to my labs environment. And we're going to build a stack. Now, we don't have 35 to 60 minutes. I think I've got about 15. So what I'm going to do is start with a blank OpenShift on OpenStack environment. And we're going to go from there to build out the rest of the stack and pipeline, et cetera, for building this app. So I'll click on Build to submit what I want. I'll provide it the repository of that code base. And I'm going to build Red Hat Toronto and provide my credentials to kick off the build process. And so what that's done is it's taken all the parameters from this web app and it's sent it to Ansible Tower. So let's go ahead and take a look. And as I said, Ansible Tower is kind of the secret sauce where we get everything done. So Tower has proven to be a great place where our developers and our operations teams converge. And this seems to be, where everybody ends up working together. And our pattern at Labs is if you want to introduce a new technology, the first thing you do is install it manually and get it up and running and show somebody in a demo. The next thing you do is automate it by writing a playbook in Ansible and installing it in Tower. And now everybody knows how to use it and deploy it. And that's a huge way to accelerate the use of new technologies in a safe and secure and standardized way, which has just been awesome. So let's go ahead and take a look at the jobs that are running. And what I've done is kicked off this job here called Infographic, and you can see the project name, Red Hat Toronto, the GitHub URL that I provided, my credentials, and the set of technologies that I want. And what's happening here is that Ansible is executing a set of tasks and playbooks that are setting up the different components of the system. And what's great about Ansible playbooks is that they're idempotent. And what that means is no side effects. So if I execute it once, if I execute it 5 times, I'm going to get the same result. It's kind of foolproof. So even I can do this on stage and be relatively certain I'm going to get in the environment I need. It's like pressing the elevator button 5 times. It's always going to get the same result. So what we should see now in OpenShift is a new environment is being set up, a CI/CD pipeline is being set up, an application is being built, and different stages are being set up for dev, for test, and for UAT. Now we purposefully avoid production at Labs because we're not releasing code to production, we're releasing code to users to get fast feedback. Right? This is prototyping, and we want to work fast to find issues with our code to get us to a better spot quickly. And what we can see here is it's taking that code base, it knows how to build my Node.js application, it's going to run it through a pipeline, and it's going to build a containerized image. Check that image into a Docker registry, and now it's deploying my application automatically, which it knew nothing about before kicking this off, and setting up that application. Now, I didn't tell you what the application was. So the application is called Infographic, and let's see, I think it's finished standing up here. So we'll go ahead, and it looks like a few seconds ago it just deployed. Let's take a look at it. And in fact, the app is the Infographic web application that I showed you earlier. But there's a difference. The URL you can see here is Red Hat Toronto. So that route, that URL here, didn't exist until we created this project. So the system has actually gone out and set up the networking, the DNS, the storage for the application, and created a public URL here that actually we can all hit. So, okay, that's awesome. We can set up an environment really quickly and get started coding. Let's code. So putting our developers' hats and our designer hats on, if I look at this app, it's really, really wordy. Too much text. That's a common flaw of lots of web apps. And the Red Hat logo is cool and all, but we're in Toronto, so I thought we'd do something more appropriate. So I went and downloaded a graphic that I thought would be better. So let's go ahead and make some code changes. And you can see here, as a developer, I don't need to be in OpenShift or know how any of that stuff operates. I can just focus on coding and getting stuff done. So right now, I'm going to make changes in GitHub, but you can imagine your favorite IDE, or imagine CodeEnvy, which we also integrate with Labs, to have a web-hosted IDE. And I want to do a couple things. So let's change. I know that index.html is where all that wordy text is. So I'm going to take that, get your hands, that big line there, and I'm going to say, hello, Red Hat Day, Canada. It's a little shorter. And commit my change. And the next thing I'm going to do is I want to change a graphic. So if I can make this a little bit smaller, I'll show you my graphic that I got, which may look familiar. Hopefully we have a few fans of the Maple Leafs. Yes, all right. One fan, really? That's it? Seriously? Did I pick Blue Jays? I don't know. I thought the Leafs would be the right choice. So let's go ahead and upload that image to make a change from the Red Hat image to the Maple Leafs image. And I want to just make sure, keep me honest here. Take a look at the change that I just checked in. All right, so we're going to move Red Hat and we're going to the Leafs. So, okay, I'm a developer. Maybe I've even checked this out on my laptop, but now it's time to get this deployed and share this with other folks and run it through a security scan and run it through other bits and pieces so that I can start integrating testing, et cetera. So if we go back to OpenShift, you now see that we have the pipeline of different environments, dev, test, and UAT. And we've set up a Jenkins instance, which is our tool for CI/CD. It's integrated with OpenShift, and it knows how to build, test, and deploy a containerized version of my application. We've automatically set up a pipeline that knows how to do this. So this did not exist until we created our lab environment. And so I can just one-click build, and the whole process begins without any prior setup. And in fact, if I set up a webhook, I don't even have to click. Basically, every time a developer commits a code change, we automatically deploy and test a new version of the application. And that's just a great practice for really accelerating continuous delivery in an extreme way. So what's happening here is it's pulling down the code from GitHub. It knows where to get it. It's building the application. It's packaging it. It runs it through a quick security scan. Now, this is a simple pipeline, but you can imagine at Labs, if we want to experiment with PCI compliance, which we were talking about a little bit earlier off stage here, we can build that into the pipeline and enforce different rules and constraints to ensure that the code that's coming out meets those compliance regulations. And what's happened here is it's now built a new version of my app and deployed it to dev. So let's go ahead and take a look and see if we like the changes any better. So it says here a few seconds ago, a new app is deployed, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the new URL. And we now have the Maple Leafs. So you can see there, this is what I'm talking about with cycle time. Getting something out the door quickly and getting it into a shared environment is powerful. Now, if I like my changes and I want to promote, let me make this a little bit bigger. If I want to promote my changes to a test environment, I can do that just by one-clicking here. And this is great as a release engineer. If I'm ready to push things quickly, it's pretty much foolproof. And you can see there it deployed in only 10 seconds. I'll go ahead and push it out to UAT. Why did it take such a short amount of time? It's because we only built the application once, and we built it into an image. Why is that important? Because the image is immutable. It can't be changed. So that when we're deploying it in dev, in test, in UAT, it always works the same way, so that I have that repeatability, so that it works the same way in UAT as it does on my laptop. All the config is managed by the system. I can't fat finger anything and introduce human error, which is, I think, 80% of issues in operations are caused by human error. So this allows us to move quickly, move safely, and get code out to different stages of our pipeline. So that's a little taste of what it's like to work at Labs and why we can build things, like the apps that I've shared with you in 5 to 8 weeks by using a system that's built for speed and experimentation. Now, some final thoughts. A lot of people ask me, well, where are Labs and how can I go? So we have built purpose-built facilities. Our first lab was in Mountain View. That was our prototype facility. We established a lab in London about a month and a half ago. which is really exciting. And then we have now launched a lab in Boston, and in fact, next week is our big launch. These are premier facilities, and Singapore comes in September. However, Labs is designed to be flexible, to be on the road, and to allow us to innovate anywhere. So in fact, yesterday, I was at a pop-up lab here in Toronto, where we just got a space that's a space for co-working that's gorgeous, by the way. And we now have convened on that space, and we can get access to the same experience and technologies. And this is really powerful because it gives you the best of both worlds. It allows you to get out of your day-to-day office and have an immersive experience where you can really focus on what's important in a very intense way. But also, it allows you to go home at night. So for people that, Boston's not very close, or you're not on the road 4 to 8 weeks like Brent, it sounds like he is. The pop-up labs gives you the best of both worlds. So in conclusion, that's Labs in a nutshell. I'm super excited to see what we're going to be doing this next year, because we've got such interesting use cases that are going on. And again, the way we get started is what we call a discovery session. So I encourage you, if that's something you're interested in talking more about, I'll be here and mingling at lunch. So happy to talk about how we use discovery sessions to kickstart Labs engagements. Thank you very much.
This is a pretty big concept, so, Ed.
Yep. If a customer goes to the landing page and wants access to CI/CD capabilities or any of the capabilities you saw in that system, would they be able to access and get a real lab environment? So the answer is yes. What I showed you was a simple tool. There is a more complex way we deploy labs with users and groups. That's probably not important for a demo. So it's a bit more sophisticated when we do the full thing. But yes, all of that is real, and it's automated, and it's also open source.
All right. Any other questions? Go ahead. Here.
Is there any tutorial or video available for that?
Is there a tutorial or a video available for, I guess, the demo that I showed you? So there is a video of the demo on YouTube. So if you search for Open Innovation Labs, it will show you something similar to what I just did there. But kind of behind the scenes, we've written what's called an automation API, and then we have a large set of Ansible playbooks and OpenShift templates to automate that effort. We take from other places. So actually, Labs team collaborates with the OpenShift engineering team to automate things like OpenShift on OpenStack or OpenShift on Google, et cetera. So we're contributors to that upstream code base. So some of that code lives there. But I would also recommend, if you're interested in digging into the real details, we have a set of repositories on GitHub under RHT Labs, RHT-Labs, so that's our org in GitHub. And there you'll find things like Ansible stacks and our automation API, and that's how we power the automation principles.
Does it have the source page, like the resource page also?
Does it have a resource page? Yes. So if you go, start with GitHub, and you'll see kind of the starter information about how each thing works. And there's a bunch of repos, so I'm happy to talk to you about the different bits and pieces.
Sure.
Yeah, I see one more question.
Yep, right over here.
Sorry. How long does it take to build a lab? Yep. So that was probably about 30 minutes to set up from absolute bare metal. We set up everything from Pixie Boot all the way up to VMs, OpenStack, OpenShift. And then the rest is what you saw in the demo. So it's usually less than 60 minutes.
All right, we'll go one more question right here. Oh,
I can hear you.
It is now.
Just wondering if discovery is 1 day, how long does it take for a lab?
Yeah, so the question is, if discovery is 1 day, how long is the typical lab engagement? It's usually 1 to 3 months long. And we do that on purpose. We don't want it to be 6, 9, 12 months. We want to build something quickly and then move on. I'm sorry, can you repeat?
Yeah.
Is it immersive in the sense that you commit to going there the whole time? That's a great question, actually. I'm glad you brought it up. So the way we work is we establish the residents of the lab, and those are full-time, dedicated folks. We're working together to accelerate something that needs to be done for the business anyway. And by teaming up with Red Hat, and working at the lab, the concept is we're going to get it done even faster. But there is sort of a secondary team, right? Like the larger organization, stakeholders, people that might play a role but are not going to be dedicated day to day. So we talk about it kind of in the circles of a core and then a supporting secondary team. And they may also spend some time in their residency as well.
Yeah. All right. So, but just that's a key point there, right? This isn't like a nice to have for the companies who want to do this. This is something that the companies who invest in the innovation labs, they have goals, whatever the use case may be. These are priority goals that they believe they need to do, they need to execute on to be able to get their business going in the direction they want, get their development going in the way they want, deliver new capabilities to their customers. So this isn't something that you say, oh, you know what, maybe we'll do it. No, this is something that companies, when they invest, they're like, this is strategic to us. This is where we want to be. So getting the full-time commitment is key, I think, to any success, right? So, all right. So thank you very much, Mike. Awesome.
Thanks.